Welcome to another edition of A Voice to the Gentile Church. I'm Jim Wingerter, and next to me is Pastor Roger Diaz. Next to him is Dolores Lowe. And as we said last week, we're going to say again this week, there's no missing of the opportunity to use an extreme situation in as extreme measures as are possible. So the abortion issue is flared up huge.
Right. So this week we saw pro-abortionists showing up at the homes of our SCOTUS judges, right?
Yes.
Supreme Court judges. We saw them going to churches and, breaking into the churches and disrupting worship, all of that. There was an interesting video of a bunch of them dressed as the Handmaid's Tale, the long red cloak with the hat and white, and the parishioners were ready for them, so the parishioners literally picked them up and threw them out of the church. But interesting enough, because there's never, the left just keeps getting crazier. The Satanic Temple is arguing that abortion is a ritual in their faith in order to thwart legal challenges to it. So at least they're saying the truth, right?
Well, they're being honest from that perspective, yeah.
Yep.
So were there any violence?
Oh yeah, there's been lots of violence. The interesting thing is,
but you can't really use the word violence, right?
No, right.
You have to come up with a more woke term for it. What would be a good woke term for violence?
For violence?
In this case? Yeah.
Dissension.
Spontaneous disagreement. Acted out.
Yeah. Remember, they were peaceful protests.
Now, what would have happened if pro-lifers were to become, God forbid, violent? What would that be?
They would throw us all in jail
Terrorists,
instantly. Yeah.
Insurrectionists.
Yep. That's exactly what would have happened.
We live in a very strange world.
And the interesting thing is, Nancy Pelosi and the White House have encouraged people to go protest in front, and that's against the law.
There's a law in the books.
There's a law in the books that says that you can't do that. Intimidation, yeah. But they're out there,
laws, they don't exist for the people on the left.
So in an interesting turn of events, leftists are now showing up at Nancy Pelosi's house.
Leftists?
They don't think she's doing enough.
Yes, exactly. She's not doing enough. They want her to, charge the Supreme Court justices with something. They don't know what, something.
She is damned if she does and damned if she doesn't.
I think she deserves it. And then in a move that is mostly for appearances, right? Chucky Schumer brought a bill before the Senate.
What an appropriate name, Chucky.
Yeah. To codify abortion, nationwide abortion, right? Because remember, this ruling, if it goes through, would not get rid of abortion.
No.
It only gets rid of abortion on a nationwide basis. It would go to the states, and it would be a state by state.
Which leaves me with the question, why is that so horrible to them?
Because they want to force everybody into their leftist agenda.
They want nationalistic laws. They want to control the country, and to let it get back to the states. It's moving away from their idea of nationalism. What their idea of nationalism is, because they see eventually a global law concerning abortion. In fact, the UN is working on that, a global law towards abortion.
Right. So Chuck Schumer advanced a bill to codify abortion on a national basis. Now, it would have required 60 votes to pass. Well, it lost 51-49 because all 50 Republicans stayed solid to strike it down, and then Manchin joined the Republicans. He's the lone Democrat who crossed the line.
That's the end of him.
They hate him right now, and he's.
And we're looking at him with a dimension of respect.
Right, exactly, because he would not let Build Back Better, that sham that was throwing money left and right, pass. He stood with Republicans on other issues. I can't remember right now. I'm sorry, my mind is
He may
going.
have to change his party.
Well, the Republicans have said that he is welcome in their party.
Yeah.
But so far he's sticking with being Democrat, right?
That's amazing.
Even though. So in some really sad news where if I could burn somebody alive with as much pain and torture as I could, this is the person that I would burn.
Genghis Khan is coming out.
Yeah, I'm telling you. I am telling you. So this guy who thinks of himself as a girl,
I know who you mean.
quotes himself as Hannah Tubbs, raped a 10-year-old girl. When he was 17, the girl was 10. The district attorney in California, who is so liberal, Garcetti, refused to bring charges against him as an adult. So then they turned around and put him in a juvenile facility with children, with younger people, right? Because
He wasn't twisted enough.
Yes.
Put the
So-
fox in the hen house, huh?
Right, and he found the trick, right? He was claiming he was trans, and if they put him into a jail with, adults, male adults, he'd be in trouble and all this other stuff, so they put him in with juveniles. And now, that wonderful, lovely individual has been charged with murder, arrested and charged with murder. Apparently, he tried to rob someone, and then that person wound up in the river, and he was the one who did it. Such a wonderful individual, right?
Who's going to take responsibility for that?
Probably no one. Because
one.
as we've seen, right, in California, Chicago, other areas like that, there's no law enforcement whatsoever.
Well, some of these people on the extreme left, the progressive, they want to do away with law enforcement to begin with. They want a society where there's no law enforcement.
But here's my question. I cannot believe that they are looking around and saying human beings are, they're really nice. Deep down inside, they're nice people. We should, is that really what they believe?
They must. They must have bought the lie, because I don't believe that.
I don't believe it either.
No, I don't think they honestly believe that, but it's countercultural from their perspective. So if it's countercultural, then they will support it.
You're right.
Yeah, in the Diary of Anne Frank at the end, Anne says that she knows that deep down inside people are still good. And I'm like, oh, sweetie.
Right,
no,
right.
No, that is not true.
You missed it, honey.
Yeah, you missed it. I'm glad that you stayed optimistic till the end, but
Right.
you missed it.
There's goodness in humanity, there's no question about it. But like we've said many times, even on the program, humanity is demonized. By and large, the broad scope of humanity, we're demonized. And if someone's demonized, they're unpredictable. They can just go any direction at any given time. And you see that in humanity, right?
Right.
You see glimpses of goodness, true love, and godliness, divinity in humanity. But then suddenly you see another aspect of humanity that reflects the complete opposite. That's because we're demonized. And the only thing that would help us is just a good old-fashioned deliverance.
Yeah,
That would be nice, yeah.
And that's coming.
it is.
Yes, it is, on a massive scale. So to end on a good note, so I'm not Miss Debbie Downer, Casey DeSantis, the wife of our governor,
Okay.
spoke recently. And she, as you all know, she had cancer, right? She recently
Breast
had
cancer.
cancer. So she came out and said she was feeling great. She gave all the credit to God. She said God is great. And then in general, the DeSantis family is having, a great, DeSantis has had a massive haul in money for his reelection. Disney challenged DeSantis on the law that he passed disbanding the special municipalities, and the court stuck with DeSantis, right? Because he didn't, as much as the liberals like to say that he targeted Disney, right? That's not what he did. He disbanded that statewide. So it wasn't just Disney. Any other special municipality like that also got disbanded.
Over the years, as many of us heard about the fact that Disney had their own government, and we all stood there and went, well, that is unbelievably wrong. We've been waiting for this to happen.
Right.
It had to happen. It was only a matter of time, for sure. So it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely a good thing.
You know, you live in the free state of Florida.
So, well, within the confines of the free state of Florida is Orange County, and Orange County was telling all of their residents that they were going to have to foot the bill, and not paying any heed to the reality that there are people that live on Disney property that are paying taxes,
Right.
and that the taxes will simply go to a different place.
Right.
The liberals are having a bad month.
Yes, they are.
Not liberals, the progressives.
The progressives. Yeah.
So I got a question for you, Dolores. This is from the hip.
Okay.
I forewarned you about this. We did talk about this a while back. We did a program on this. You know, the government's been talking about what's called disclosure, right? And you know what disclosure is? Our government's been talking about disclosure. No? Don't know what disclosure is?
Depends.
Now, disclosure meaning they were prepared to give whatever information they had on quote-unquote UFOs.
Oh, yes. Okay, so in
UFOs.
general, in remember, Florida has a sunshine law, which is all about disclosure of all things that the government does, all that kind. So yes,
Yeah,
disclosure
government, but
and
the
UFOs.
federal government's been talking about disclosure, that they were threatening to give out whatever information they have about quote-unquote UFOs.
Yeah, we were all excited about that.
Well, they've been doing it. It's been gradual. They've been seeping out information on it, whatever they feel like they want to give out, and this is coming from mostly the House members in the House and so on, and Senate as well. Marco Rubio and so on. He's been
Right.
making statements about that. So they seem to be willing to disseminate slowly information about what they're not understanding, what they're seeing. So Obama made a statement way back in 2017, actually no earlier than that. And so disclosure is happening, right? Government is beginning to say, yes, we don't.
Yep.
Latest statements from government officials, we don't know what they are.
Right.
We don't think that they're Russian or Chinese, and we just don't know what they are. That's a huge leap on behalf of the American government to say something like that, right?
Right.
And that's happening. So what do you think about that, Dolores?
I'm
With your
waiting for-
experience in the field that you're in,
So I'm a little bit.
we're not going to talk
in
about what
general,
field you're
yeah,
in, but
in general, the government never releases anything that they don't intend to release with a
for a
motive,
purpose,
right?
For a purpose, yeah.
For a purpose. So, I mean, they've been releasing videos from the Navy and the Air Force of these UFOs. They've been talking about it. So my question is, what's behind it, right?
What ultimately will come. So a congressman, I can't remember his name right now, said that what's been coming from the government, from the military mostly, is only the tip of the iceberg, and that they have tremendous more video evidence and so on. So what's been happening in the last 2 months in this genre, in this area, is that nuclear facilities have been, I should say, visited. There's been many quote-unquote sightings around nuclear facilities in the last couple of months. So this has been happening around nuclear facilities for decades, right? There are accounts that the government is beginning to talk about now where nuclear plants were shut down. By lights appear above the plants, and the plant would shut down. They would have a test plan, and the test would just go south. So whatever these things are, whatever they are clearly interested in our nuclear capability, weaponry wise, and they're shutting down. Tests and plants are being shut down by these things. So what do you think about what's happening there, and the fact that suddenly in the last 2 months there is an escalation of quote-unquote sightings around these nuclear weapon facilities?
I don't know, but I find it
Not only here, but in Russia as
yeah.
well.
I find it interesting that they would focus on nuclear energy, which has, the Green Deal wants to kill nuclear energy, right? So one of two things that could, if I was positing hypothesis here, it could be real aliens, and they actually have a use for, nuclear components. It could be that the government is trying to push their green agenda further. So, and in general, if you go back, I'm a big sci-fi reader, right? I've read everybody. I read everybody from Herbert to Aldous Huxley. I've read tons of stuff. And Heinlein, a lot of those guys are atheists, right? Because they think that you can't believe in God and believe in, aliens and all this other stuff. Whereas I would have no issue with that. I have no issues with, a God who can make a universe as large as well, infinite, almost infinite, right? It's expanding. Who can make a universe as large as we have, could put other people out there or other beings out there. I have no issues. God is extremely creative, right? Look at the world around us. So it could be part of that also. I don't know. I'd be excited if we had aliens come. But would it be aliens like Independence Day? Or aliens like, oh my gosh, the
Close Encounters of the
Close
Third
Encounters, or the Arthur C. Clarke. I don't know if you've ever read Arthur C. Clarke. He has a book where aliens come to Earth and they're benevolent and they're taking care of humanity, but humans never get to see them. And in the end of the book, you find out that the aliens look just like a demon, right? And that's why they weren't showing themselves, because people would have taken them for demons. Sort of like Mr. Spock with his pointy ears, right?
Well, all sorts of questions come to mind. And there are people that are still in the camp of saying, if you talk about UFOs or quote-unquote aliens, you're in a kook camp, right? So, but even though the government's
admitting it now.
Even though the government is filtering hard evidence that these things are real.
Well, there's an interesting thing. There was a massive earthquake on Mars. That was captured by one of the probes that we have out there.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
It's interesting.
Well, there's life on Mars. It's not life as we know it. It's life in a different form. So, yeah, I can discuss this quite a bit because, I go all the way back to Von Däniken. I was a Von Däniken, Chariots of the Gods and everything else, and I firmly believe the stuff of Eric Von Däniken. Of course, I'm not there today. I'm way beyond where I was before in terms of what I see, what I believe, what I can clearly understand. The Book of Enoch talks about the fallen angels.
Yep.
The watchers, right? The watchers that were appointed by God to watch over humanity, to protect humanity. All right, so 1/3 of the watchers fell into rebellion. So they're still out there,
right?
But they're in rebellion against God. There are 2/3 of the watchers, or what we call aliens, what we call angels, that are still active, watching over humanity. So based on what I just said, we call them angels or messengers, but the Book of Enoch called them watchers, which is a completely different word. You can be an angel if you bring a message from God, but a watcher is a designation given to someone who is watching over, like an elder watches over a congregation. So these watchers have been appointed by God. 1/3 of them are rebellious. And so is it possible that the 1/3 of the watchers who are rebellious and fallen are working to deceive humanity by any means that's available to them, which are spiritual means?
Oh yeah, we're seeing that all around, right? Let's face it, the Green New Deal is a way to cover up a lot of what happens in Revelation, right? If you read Revelation and you think about, the problems that we're having, that we're supposed to climate change and all that, it's right out of Revelation, right? So it wouldn't surprise me that we had demons trying to mask themselves as aliens coming, because who is coming? Yeah. Who is supposed to be coming?
Well, there's a huge deception factor right there. But we ought to be mature enough to understand that if 2/3 of the watchers are still active on God's behalf, it is entirely possible that a lot of what we're seeing are the actions of the watchers, the angels.
Yeah, because you could, they, just like the rapture is a theology that is really meant to neuter Christians, you could have these people that are expecting an alien to come, and then when Jesus comes, oh my gosh, it's an alien.
Yeah, we've talked about that, I think, before, where Hollywood and the world forces are setting people up to resist the actual coming of Messiah, and it'll be seen as some sort of an alien invasion, hostile alien invasion, for sure.
Right.
For sure. There's a lot that we can discuss here. A lot of it is in the realm of things that we shouldn't get into. But I think what's happening right now with the American government, the governments of the world, it's not just here.
Right.
England, the United Kingdom, and China, they're just giving them whatever information they have.
Isn't it amazing how they all
By
do
the
it
way,
together?
there's some pretty strange things that are happening in China.
Yep, the red sky.
In terms, the red sky, apparitions appearing on the horizon, just some really weird things happening over there that might have to do with Project Blue Beam. Nevertheless, there's strange things that are happening. So, but these sightings, so-called sightings, they're not new. They've been around for a long, long time, and they go back to biblical times for sure.
And I will have to say that I will never call you a conspiracy theorist again.
Again, never.
Because you are now a
You hear
spoiler
that?
alert. You are a spoiler alert.
All right.
Well, how long was he a conspiracy theorist?
Forever.
20 years?
Yes.
2 or
now
3
we're
decades.
like seeing it all, and
3
you
decades.
were just ahead. You were ahead of your time.
So it's things are unfolding that's pretty amazing, actually, what we're seeing in the world today.
You know, Hollywood has produced tons of movies that have left us going, that's our government.
Yep.
And then we're surprised when people don't trust the government.
Right.
But we've been given reason, and these speculations aren't speculations.
Right.
Yeah. I saw that thing about China and the red sky. That's pretty amazing things happening over there. Whole communities are running scared because the entire sky turns blood red.
And I mean,
from horizon to horizon.
I mean, people are fond of saying, sunset with beautiful. This was red.
Yeah, blood red. So, from horizon to horizon.
Yeah. And only in China?
Certain areas in China, amazing things are happening in China. It's been happening for a long time. Possibility one, Project Blue Beam. Second possibility, someone's trying to get their attention. Someone incredibly supernatural.
Or it's another experiment they're running.
Possibly,
just
or
like
they're trying to manipulate their own people. China is capable of doing that. Anyway, that's in the realm of mystery, right? We'll come back to that another time. So we have a question, Jim, that came from a former congregant.
Right. Who said, what is Lag BaOmer all about? That is the one Jewish holiday I could never understand, and it was ignored when I attended Fellowship Church. I know it has something to do with counting the days between Pesach and Shavuot. But what's so special about that? Also, there is some kind of tie-in with the Bar Kochba Rebellion of the 2nd century A.D.
All right. So the person who posed this question is a legitimate historian. So he's posing this question from the position of his particular historiography. So I'm not going to try and get into history too much on this. There's history on it, and it's pretty clear, but let's first of all recognize what this is all about. What is the Omer? What is the counting of the Omer about? It's called Shirirat HaOmer. Shirirat HaOmer means to count the Homer. So is it biblical? Yes, it's found in the Bible actually. It is in the Bible to count the Omer, to count the days actually. In Leviticus chapter 23 verse 15.
You shall also count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day when you brought in the sheaf of the wave offering, there shall be 7 complete Sabbaths. Right.
So there is the reality of counting the days leading up to what will ultimately be Shavuot. So this is an agricultural celebration, a festival that's found in the Bible. It's real, it's in there. Now, interesting that today in Jewish tradition, they start counting from the 2nd day of Pesach. That's not what it says in Leviticus. Right? What it says there in Leviticus chapter 23, 15, is the day following the Shabbat of the first Shabbat of Pesach. That's not necessarily the 2nd day.
So they're assuming that the first day of the festival is the Sabbath that's being spoken of.
Right. No, but they're talking about Pesach. On the 2nd day of Pesach is what it says, right? What they say. The tradition that they hold is that on the 2nd day of Pesach, so if Pesach falls on a Monday, you begin counting from Tuesday. But the biblical precedent is different. It says from the day following the first Shabbat.
Right.
So the Sunday morning is when you begin to count 49 days, which brings you to Shavuot. So as it turns out this year, Sunday was the second day, right?
Right.
Yes.
So
It
Shavuot
worked
this year, right?
With the Christian calendar,
Yes.
it worked.
Shavuot this year is falling exactly 49 days following, right? So it's working out exactly according to their tradition and according to the Bible. So let me say something before we go any further that I think is important. The counting of the Omer, which really an Omer is a sheaf, right? The New Testament, the biblical word for Omer in English is a sheaf. We know what a sheaf is.
Right.
This is a very Jewish celebration. Very Jewish. In fact, I'm not going to challenge their motive for counting from the second day of Pesach in contrast to what the Bible says. It's a very Jewish time, very Jewish celebration, and that's what we're going to arrive at here. So yes, counting of the Omer, or the days actually, not the Omer, is biblical. Now, in biblical times, this celebration was this recognition of the counting of the days was a tremendous celebratory time. It was a time of celebration. Because every time a sheaf was brought and waved before the temple, it was saying the harvest is before us. It's pointing to the harvest. And this was a very festive time, a time when marriages would occur and so on. And it's just that type of celebration. So again, the Omer is roughly translated into a sheaf, and it's a hand bundle, which I believe is 1/10 of an ephah. So an ephah is a measuring a measure of wheat in biblical times. An ephah. Ephah roughly is a basket. So 1/10 of the basket is a sheaf or an Omer. So what the Israelites will do is, in ancient times of the temple mostly, they would bring a Omer before the temple and wave it, and there was an offering to the temple at the same time.
And they did that daily.
Yeah, counting the days and so on. So when God said you should count the days from the first Shabbat following Pesach, 49 days to Shavuot, they expanded that to bring in a sheaf before, because on the first day following the Shabbat after Pesach is first fruits, where you do a wave offering, right? There's no command, no direction in the Bible to do it every day, but they began to every day count, and their expression of counting was bringing that Omer, the sheaf, before God and waving it, but they would also give it to the temple, to the work of the temple.
So let's clarify for the listeners that may not know that the 49 days, it's the day after the 49th day is the 50th day, and that's what the word Pentecost is pointing to.
Right, so Shavuot is Pentecost. So this, sort of in a nutshell, is what counting of the Omer is about. Shivirat HaOmer. Now, the question has to do with Lag BeOmer. Okay, so let's talk about Lag BeOmer. Lag BeOmer, the word Lag means it's numerology. Right. The two letters are
Lamed and Gimel.
Right. Amounts to 33. So we're dealing with Hebrew numerology. Let me say before we go any further that a lot of this has to do with Kabbalistic ideas. The Kabbalah is very much involved. So the number 33 is significant in the occult, right? It's everywhere in the occult. In Kabbalah, it's also very significant. So here we have the number 33 represented in Lag BaOmer. So what's the story behind this? Now, this is history, but it's not verifiable history. It's sort of a tradition, a legend that came from ancient times. So we're dealing with the son of Rabbi Akiva, a very famous rabbi of the 1st century AD or CE. Very famous rabbi. He had a son. His son's name was, if I can get here, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Shimon Bar Yochai was his son, and he was after the death of Rabbi Akiva, he was responsible for continuing the school of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had literally thousands upon thousands of students. So in the town of Meron, which is in the Galilee, Meron is an ancient town. It goes all the way back to the time of the conquest of the land of Israel. It's just north and west of the Galilee, close to what is today Sfat.
Okay.
Sfat. So what happened back at this time? We're talking about roughly 149 AD. This son of Rabbi Akiva, Ben Yochai, Bar Yochai, Rabbi Bar Yochai, he and his students suffered through a time of a plague. I'm not really sure what the plague was about. It probably had to do with the war that was being fought against the Romans at that time. There was this Bar Kochba revolt. They were in the thick of the Bar Kochba revolt, and the plague probably had something to do with that, because the Roman army would cut off food sources to their enemies and so on. So it may have had something to do with that. I'm not real sure. But at any rate, 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died at this time, because of the famine, because of the plague actually that took place. Now, according to the legend, or according to the story, 33 days into this time of counting the Omer, the plague came to an end. And it's considered to be a miracle. So what has happened since then? So on the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer, going back to this event where 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died, they began to celebrate the 33rd day going forward to the end. So whatever is left between the 33rd day and the 49th day or 50th day is the time of celebration. So what the Jewish people have done since this time is, for 33 days they would mourn and fast, and they would not cut their hair. They would, just go through a period, sort of something like the Christian Lent.
Okay.
So the Christian Lent is a period of 30 days where you would fast, you would, you're not going to eat lavishly or anything like that. And at the end of that, you just celebrate. So it's like that, right? So 33 days of fasting, mourning, certain prayer is offered up every day, yet you count for the Omer. And then at the end of that, on the 34th day, you celebrate, you cut your hair, you do all those wonderful things during that period. So this traditionally is a time for weddings. So the 33 days, which is what Lag Be'omar is about this time of mourning and fasting and so on. Now, what could we say about the inclusion of Bar Kochba? I don't know the history well enough, but I do know that Bar Kochba at this time was active in the rebellion against the Romans, and he had a victory, a minor victory at this time, and it's only today, almost 2,000 years, 1,800 years after this revolt, the Bar Kochba revolt, that the Jewish people today, they go to the town of Meron, where this occurred, Meron in the Galilee, and they celebrate Bar Kochba's minor victory. They celebrate his victory that falls in alignment with Lag Be'omar. And so they mourn, and at the same time, on the 33rd day, they celebrate the victories of this Bar Kochba. So this is what I know about this. I've never really delved into this really deep enough to speak at length other than what I've already said. I just don't know enough about it. So I do know that today, modern Zionism celebrates this particular day, Lag BaOmer, and not because of the students of the plague, where the students of Rabbi Akiva were killed and then the plague came to an end. But they celebrate this day because of the Bar Kochba, the Bar Kochba revolt and the victory that he had, even though he was a false Messiah, right, and he ultimately would die at the hands of the Romans. So I'm not sure what else I can offer in regards to the question itself. Why do we not celebrate it? Because it's not Christian.
Right.
It's just not something that we should even consider. We should, if the Jewish people celebrate this, whatever is behind it, be it Kabbalistic involvement or not, that's what they do, and we should leave them to do it. That's
Let them be them.
Yep.
Let the Jewish people be the Jewish people. Now, in recent years, with the whole Jews for Jesus and the Messianic movement, these
That's the
actual Christians who are Jews for Jesus and the Messianic Jews, they would recognize this day and they would do something towards celebrating this day. They would find some way to allegorize it and make it Christian. That's what they've been doing. And I think they only do it to attract Jewish people into their movement. It's an evangelistic ploy, in other words, that these Jews for Jesus and these Messianic Jews would begin to celebrate this really purely Jewish time, and they do it for the wrong reason. Their motives are, again, to lure Jewish people in and to give them a sense of comfort in their particular Christian movement. We have to remember that Jews for Jesus or Messianic Jews are Christians.
Right.
We tend to stray away from that, and they're not. Paul made it really clear in Romans, again in Ephesians, that in Christ you're neither Jew or Gentile.
But they strive for their own identity.
Right.
Yeah, most of that is to justify their Christianity.
Right. Right.
To justify their reasoning. If you have to draw your countrymen into your own religion to feel good about your religion, then you've got a basic problem.
Right.
Yeah.
You have an identity problem. Let the Jewish people be the Jewish people. God made incredible promises to the people of Israel, and those promises will not be broken. Our Christianity is, for us, let them be the people that God has led them to be. They're secure in God's hands. The restoration of Israel is inevitable. It's happening. Now, in the kingdom, in the Messianic kingdom, would they celebrate Lag BaOmer? Would the great king in Jerusalem say, okay, you can celebrate this or you shouldn't? We don't know. So I asked a rabbi recently about Tisha B'Av, which is coming up in August, right?
Right.
Okay.
So Tisha B'Av is the commemoration or the memorial of the time when the temple was destroyed. Both temples were
Right.
destroyed. And other very unfortunate things happened, the expulsion edict to the Jewish people on Tisha B'Av. It is believed that it goes back to the spies, right? The 10 spies and, Kadesh Barnea. Although the timeline doesn't favor that at all, because Israel left Mount Sinai shortly after Shavuot, and they would have been at Kadesh Barnea sooner than in August.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, at any rate,
They walk slow.
well, again, it's really, I'm indifferent about that actually. But so we have Tisha B'Av. So should Christians celebrate Tisha B'Av? No. And we can recognize what happened to the Jewish people during that time. So I asked the rabbi, in the millennial kingdom, would the people of Israel still recognize Tisha B'Av and treat Tisha B'Av the same way, with mourning, with sackcloth,
Good
ashes,
question.
and so on? And he said no. He says in the millennial kingdom, Tisha B'Av would be the most joyful of all celebrations.
Okay.
So is that true? I don't know. It sounds good.
So what's the logic? Why?
The logic is that we're no longer mourning or sorrowful about the destruction of the temples, the expulsion edict, and all of the other pogroms and things that happened on Tisha B'Av. We're now redeemed as a people. We're celebrating Messiah in the midst of Israel. It's going to be a wonderful time.
Oh, I'm
So
glad he recognized it.
that's how he answered, and I understood where he was coming from.
Right.
I prefer to think that when the Messiah comes and he reigns in Jerusalem, he would probably look at Tisha B'Av and said, listen, this is in your past.
Right.
Let's stick with the 7 that we have.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
the 7 biblical festivals, and there might be a recognition of Hanukkah and Purim.
Right.
I don't know, but I do know, and I am convinced that when the Messiah comes and he establishes the kingdom of God, that the biblical festivals would be honored and celebrated. All of the other Jewish festivals, I don't know, but I'm not going to criticize them. I'm not going to take a position of judgment of what they're doing. Like I said, the whole thing of Lag BaOmer is Kabbalistic.
Right.
But who am I to judge what they're doing? I'm not in a position to judge what they're doing. So let them do what they do. Let them be who they are. We need to concentrate on being who we are. So, I'm not even sure if we did the question justice, but if the essence of the question is why do we not celebrate it? Why did we not celebrate it when this person was here at the church before? Because it's got nothing to do with us as disciples of Jesus.
With the conversations that I've had with the rabbi that you were speaking of before, he would definitively say that we as Christians should not keep Talmudic traditions.
True.
That belongs to Israel.
And I would agree with him.
Yeah.
So
we do.
Lag BaOmer is from the Zohar. It's Kabbalistic. When you get into their treatment of this time, the 33 days and then the days to follow, they treat it as a mystical journey, right? And they have this figure, which is a figure of the tree of life and all the different aspects of it. It's Kabbalah.
Right.
So, a Christian should stay clear of it. It's Jewish. Let the Jewish people do what they do. We have our own set of issues. We shouldn't try to fix their issues as well.
Yeah. I like looking forward to Pesach. Pesach is my favorite holiday, right? Mm-hmm. I have a Jewish friend of mine who's not observant, and he thinks I'm crazy because I say Pesach is my favorite holiday. But he thinks it's sad and mournful, and I'm like, oh my God, it's like the best. So anyway, I like the idea of Pesach has ended in the concept of redemption and the truth of Pesach.
Leading up to
Shavuot. Shavuot, where my Messiah is going to come and.
So you believe that Messiah comes during Shavuot?
No, I'm sorry.
Well, there's a lot of people that believe that. In fact, in the Messianic movement, not in the Jews for Jesus Messianic, but in the Gentile Hebraic movement thing, a lot of these Hebraic root people are saying Messiah comes at Shavuot because they're counting the Omer, each day they're counting, they're waiting for his arrival. Again, how do you support that from the Bible? You just don't.
I'm looking forward to Sukkot.
Sukkot?
Right.
Yeah, because it's the two main holidays, right? It's awesome. The two meanings behind those two holidays are great.
Sukkot is such a complete picture of redemption, right? What is Sukkot about? That God once again is dwelling in the midst of His creation, which He did at the beginning of the creation event, and He separated Himself because of the fall. Well, Sukkot points to that time when He will once again dwell in the midst of His creation, the new Jerusalem. He'll build His tabernacle. He will live in His tabernacle here in the new creation. So the festivals that we, when sometimes people would challenge us and say, why are you celebrating Jewish festivals? A Jewish person would say, why are you celebrating our festivals? Okay, so that I could argue against or argue for, because they're biblical festivals, of course. The Jewish person who says you're celebrating our festivals, and I would say, yes, we are, and it's an honor for us to be able to do it. I'm not going to argue with him and say, well, these are God's festivals, but to the Christian, I will challenge, because we should know better. We should know the Bible and stand on what the Bible actually teaches. So I'm not Jewish, but I am Christian, so I feel like it's incumbent upon me to, if necessary, challenge the Christian and their ideology towards God's festivals.
Most of the Jews, any of the Jewish people that I've encountered and shared with them that we keep the biblical festivals, they're elated.
Right, me too.
Or confused.
Right.
Yes.
Usually they're happy about it.
Yeah.
Well, first fruits, how we celebrate first fruits. We talked about first fruits
Okay.
and the counting of the Omer. How we celebrate first fruits is totally foreign to the Jewish people.
Right. Okay.
Our interpretation, our interpretation of the biblical festivals in an allegorical sense is very, very foreign to the Jewish people.
It's also foreign to the Christians.
Well, yeah, but the truth is, if a Christian is spirit-filled and knows their Bible, that's
Yep.
key, they know their Bible, you can make a solid argument for the biblical festivals having a prophetic
Right.
quality to them and how they point to redemption. Most spirit-filled Christians will see it and understand it.
Yeah.
Would they agree with it? No, not necessarily, because it's not something that's been formally presented to them as doctrine, right?
Right.
They've embraced, I'm not going to say, but they've embraced doctrines that are not of God. They've embraced other doctrines. So because of that, they're unable to embrace. If someone presented the whole argument for biblical festivals in a very, very profound, well way, they're still going to be challenged.
Right.
The only believer, the only Christian that would say, you know what, I'm going to consider this, is the believer who is liberated from tradition of Christian tradition.
Right. Reading the Bible consistently, there are certain topics that God covers over and over again
Right.
through different means, right? Baptism, the crossing of the Red Sea, Christ being baptized. It's covered over and over again. The festivals are the same way. It's a story that you are being told over and over again so you understand it. So I always equate the Christian walk as boot camp in the military, right? You go to boot camp to learn the way things are so that when you're out there, you execute them right.
Well, I think that's fair. But, God, we've talked about this too many times on the program, really. God said, proclaim that these are my festivals, right?
Yep.
That's what it says in Leviticus chapter 23. Proclaim that these are my festivals. And so if we do that as Christians, we have a very, very well-grounded
Right.
purpose orientation to these festivals. We're to celebrate them, but we're also to proclaim them as His festivals. That's going to keep us occupied
Yep.
forever.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
We're forever throughout the period of a year. We have 7 festivals that we are commissioned by God to proclaim that these are His festivals and to reflect why they are His festivals and to present the prophetic nature and the redemptive nature of all of these festivals. That will keep you busy.
Right.
You don't have to, embrace the big 3 festivals of the Christians, which is Halloween, Christmas, and Easter, to fill gaps. You don't have to, because the 7 festivals that God gives us is ample.
Right.
Keep you going all year long.
Yep.
So we have something to do as Christians, proclaiming that these festivals are God's festivals. Why? Here is why. And here is the good news of God's festivals. We talk about the good news of salvation, the gospel of salvation, valid, but we should be talking about the good news of God's festivals, because they're all very positive and very, very redemptive.
Mm-hmm.
The final of the 7 is God's dwelling in the midst of His creation once again. The only one of the 7 you might see as negative is Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, because that has to do with judgment.
Yeah, but I think that during Yom Kippur, you do a lot of introspection, right?
Well, that's kind of the traditional way of treating
Right.
Yom Kippur. But from a biblical context, Yom Kippur has to do with God's judgment seat, which will occur at the end of this age, the beginning of the millennial kingdom, and will also happen again at the end of the millennial kingdom. So you can say, well, this judgment thing, it's pretty negative, but it's not. Because what follows judgment in both cases?
It's redemption.
Blissful existence, the millennial kingdom, the new creation. So none of these festivals, the 7 festivals, are truly negative. They beat the socks off of Halloween, Christmas, and Easter.
Yep, absolutely.
So yeah, again, we have no need, no desire to chase down the counting of the Omer. I know some Christians do, and they add all sorts of allegorical value to it. We don't have a need for it. We have enough. God has given us enough to declare and to teach. So that's what we're doing. And for the sake of the listeners, our program, A Voice to the Gentile Church, we believe that we are commissioned to proclaim that the church ought not to be Gentile. The Gentile meaning heathen. The church ought not to be Gentile. The church ought to see itself as grafted into Israel. And if we are, the things that are pertinent to Israel from a biblical perspective, not from a traditional perspective, is important for us. And that's our desire, to proclaim that to the church that you're an Israelite. You are grafted into Israel. And the rich olive tree, the root of that rich olive tree is what we're connected to. And so, yes, biblical festivals, we can celebrate them, we can proclaim them, and in doing so, we would be accomplishing God's purpose for us. For the Messianic type believers that might be listening, I would encourage you to stay biblical, to remain faithful to God's word, and avoid tradition. Tradition is something that Messiah Jesus was adamant about, that we should not get involved, that we should remain faithful to Torah and the Tanakh. So I think that's the mission for us as Christians, to remain faithful to God's word and to avoid traditions, be it Jewish traditions or Gentile traditions.
Well, that's our program. If these questions have raised other questions in your mind, you're welcome to share them with us. We build our programs on questions that are submitted to us, as was tonight's program. If you're viewing from our website, you can simply respond at the bottom of the page to the questionnaire there and leave your question with us. If not, you can email your questions to us at voice@buildupzion.org. That's voice@buildupzion.org. And until next week,
Shalom.
Shalom.